Today I have Glain Roberts-McCabe, the founder and president of the Roundtable. You may remember her from episode 5, where we were discussing ADHD. And we actually had a good conversation about women and ADHD. I'll put that episode link in the show notes because it was a really great conversation. And I appreciate her support at the beginning of my journey with this podcast. Glain, oh, by the way, welcome, Glain. Thanks for coming.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me back. Must have done something right.
Yeah. Well, what you did do right is you took a 2 month sabbatical this year and you really announced it. And that was a big step. And I ended up doing, I hate calling it a sabbatical. I just took a month off. It really was for me.
It's a start.
It's a start. But I want to discuss it because we were in an event and you said a couple things I thought was very worth sharing with people because we learned a lot about ourselves and a lot about our team. And I think it's very important that as us entrepreneurs, we got to take time off. We can't live this forever. It'll kill you. It'll not degrade you, but just burn you out. And that's okay to take time off for yourself, but we have a hard time accepting that because I think we feel guilty that you're 2 months off, I'm a month off, and my team's still working their butts off. So I wanted you to share, why did you decide to take the 2 month sabbatical, first of all?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of people, COVID, the 2 years from March 2020 to when I decided to do the sabbatical was sort of the fall of 2021. And I've been thinking about it for a while. I'd sort of had every year I write a list. I've been doing it since I was a teenager, 25 things I want to do this year. And take a sabbatical had been coming up for several years. And I just kind of kept pushing it back, pushing it back. And then I was in another group where the entrepreneur had actually taken a full year sabbatical off his business. And I thought, okay, I think I was at one of their sessions and they were challenging us to set a goal that we had been kicking forward. And I thought, all right, I'm not going to do a full year, but I'm going to do 2 months and I'm going to do it next summer. And I just sort of put the stake in the sand. Came back and, immediately shared that with my team, said, July and August of 2022, I'm taking 2 months off. So we need to talk about and get ready for that. And, they were, I would say very supportive. I've got a really great foundation as a team. And then for me, then it became really to think about, why was I doing a sabbatical? What was important to me about having a sabbatical other than feeling exhausted and burnt out from COVID, right? And trying to keep the lights on in the business for 2 years.
And what I got from you, you weren't doing it because it was now trendy.
No,
you were doing this for a personal reason. Like it wasn't just because everyone's doing it. I got to do it because that's me, the entrepreneur. I got to follow the herd.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I mean, I think so. There's two things. So one, I think when you start a business, you have some goals for your business. And for me, I'm in the services space. We do at the Roundtable, we do leadership development work, and it's a services business. It's very hard to scale a services business, and it's even harder to build something that's saleable. A lot of services businesses, especially in the leadership coaching space that I'm in, stay pretty small. Like there are one person entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, because they're talented and they do the work themselves.
So your vision, your process, you're the
My
only one that kind of understands and gets it and can build on it
Exactly.
and build on it. That's the big
And build
key.
on it. Yeah,
Your
yeah. And
team
so
can replicate it, but they can't build on it from future. Yeah.
yeah, and often people love doing the work. Whereas for me, I'd been a general manager before I started running my business. I'd run two other businesses for two other entrepreneurs. I always associated more with being a leader than being an executive coach. I did executive coaching, but I really loved running the complexity of a business. So for me with the Roundtable, I always had the goal that I was building to sell. And I say this a lot. I say to my team all the time, we're building to sell, we're building to sell. It doesn't mean I'm going to sell tomorrow, but what it means is when you set that for yourself, you think very differently about the choices you make. So one of the things about building to sell is, as a founder, often when they buy services businesses, as the founder, you kind of get stuck with the acquiring company for 2 or 3 years until you can earn your way out. And because you're seen as so intrinsically linked to the business. So one of the things I wanted to do with my sabbatical was I wanted to pressure test the business. I wanted to see how would the team do without me for 2 months. It's longer than a month, but it's not as short, it's not a year, right? Like it felt like a good place to start. And so I could
So,
pressure test the business.
okay, so can you just explain a little bit more about this pressure test in the business? Like
Mm,
what was the goal of this? Like I think I understand what you're saying, but I'm not going to speak for the listeners because I'm pretty
yeah.
sure I don't have it right and from what you consider a pressure test, because my way of thinking is a different pressure than what you're thinking.
Well, I wanted to sort of see where the gaps might be, where the holes might be in my team's capabilities. I had a pretty good idea. I mean, at the round table, we sort of walk our talk. So, we all this the assessments we take our clients through, we run through ourselves. We've got a very strong coaching culture, strengths-based culture within the organization. I know you're a big fan of the Colby Index. We hire using the Colby
Mm-hmm.
Index as one of our tools. And so I kind of knew where my team generally was how they were gonna operate. I have a couple of senior folks on the team that, could step into the leadership role and sort of support each other in leading the firm. And I had one member of the team who, is an amazing contributor and who we have talked, about taking a bigger role, potentially buying in and becoming a partner. And what I've always said to anybody who's asked me that, because I've been asked that a lot from folks over the years, is you need to see the business through the highs and lows. You really need to understand the reality of what it means to run an entrepreneurial business where you're
You mean a future partner you're referring
future
to?
partner.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
like
got the
I would
same
say,
way. You got to understand what the
you
hell's
got to understand
involved.
what you're getting into. And
Yeah.
so I think part of that, people are never going to understand unless they have the experience of it, unless they
Ah.
actually have to step in and take on that role, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
being quote unquote the boss. And so that for me was a pressure test to see how would this individual do, and for that individual to know, is this for me? Like, do I want to do this? Intellectually, I might think I want to do it. But, when I'm actually left to be the main person for the remainder, or, the rest of the people on this team and make the decisions for the business that need to be made, how do I feel about that? So that was really, there was a big bucket for me in doing a sabbatical that was on what I wanted to see happen in the business. When I came back, what was I
Okay.
stepping back into? How did the team do? How was morale? What was happening financially?
Right. And
Right.
then, so what you're saying is they got a trial by fire without actually burning the place down.
Exactly. Like it wasn't so long. And the other thing too, for people who are listening to really know, is that the nature of our business, we're a coaching company. And so a lot of our programs happen over time. And so I have one legacy client that I do their top tier leadership program for. And because it runs every 6 weeks, I couldn't fully step away for 2 months. There was no way to time it. And so I did make the decision to come back in for 4 days and work for 4 days in the first week of August, which was at the midpoint of my sabbatical.
Right.
And I do think that also was helpful for me. It was helpful for the team. I saw a lot of what wasn't working so that I could course correct that for when I did come back in September with them and get things back on track. So
That was a
um,
day. Was that a day?
it was no, it was 4 days, because the other
Okay.
thing I'd learned was the session that I had to deliver, that I was obligated to deliver, was on a Friday.
Mm.
I knew that week that, knowing I had to work on Friday, my brain was going to be thinking about the fact that I had to work on Friday. So what I said to the team was, I will be available Tuesday to Friday
Okay.
for clients, for catching up, for, connecting with everybody. And it was good. It was a full 4 days. Kind of interesting to hit the ground running and go from, like, literally, because my first month I lived out of Toronto. I was on Vancouver Island, because my other big goal was to spend time with friends and family, and
Mm-hmm.
specifically my 80-year-old mother and my brother, who's her caregiver. And so I was out. That was my priority in July. When I came back in August, I bridged back in. I did the 4 days, and then I went off again, and I went back out to BC for another kind of 14-day
Right.
trip,
So,
right? So I sort of I'd really been off the grid that
so
first month.
that's good. I think I got to commend you to be able to go away again. A lot of
Yeah.
us would actually say we got back into it. Oh, we'll just do a little more, a little more, a little more. The next thing you know, that month is gone.
Oh,
And I
totally.
got
And
to
you know what,
commend you
that
on
that
that.
was happening. No, but that was happening. Like, it's amazing how work will suck you in very quickly. And I found that on the Monday, because I'd been on Tuesday to Friday, people were still emailing me on the Monday, even though I said I'm off as of Monday.
Hmm.
People were in, and I was checking because there was a couple of things in play that I wanted to make sure got closed off. And then by Tuesday morning, I realized, oh man, I'm going to be sucked back into this week until I was leaving Friday for
Hmm.
my second trip. And so I think that's the thing I think for all of us as business owners to really recognize is those boundaries become really important. If you're going to do something like a sabbatical, like I stayed off social media, I didn't go anywhere near it. I was going to delete the apps, but then I was afraid that I'd forget my passwords or I'd get locked out, which would be a problem. So I ended up just really burying them in the depths of my iPhone and didn't look at them. Never looked at them once. And
Yeah.
in fact, my plan was to come back on it in September. I've gone back on LinkedIn. I have not got back on Facebook and Instagram. And I don't know that I'm going to. Like I think it was very freeing not to be
Mhm.
doing a whole bunch of comparison other and oh look at
Yeah.
what they're doing, I
Get
should
in
be
that
doing
trap.
this. And yeah, and then just such a time suck, that you don't even realize it's consuming your brain. Like I feel like my thinking's been much clearer. And a lot of people ask me, they said, oh, when you went away, did you come up with a whole bunch of ideas for the business, and did you do that? I did not. Like
That's
I
awesome.
actually didn't think about the business. I thought more about where I was in my life,
Hmm.
where I was in my relationship with my husband, my family, and it really allowed things to surface for me that are more important than the business. And so, but what was interesting was coming back, like my first week back, um, that's when the ideas for the business started coming. That's where I suddenly got more clarity around certain things in the
Well,
business.
you're fresh. You're
Yeah, like I
freshly
think it was
rejuvenated. Your mental
really
energy was back to
rejuvenating.
full force.
Yeah. And I would say, when you go away on vacation and then you come back and then literally by the second day, you're like, oh my God, did I even have a vacation? I'm
Yeah.
exhausted. Like when you have that week or those 2 weeks. I would say like I've been back for a month. I'm still feeling pretty good. And this is our busy time. And yet I feel like I'm much calmer. I am way more centered in terms of what we have to focus on and much more
Hmm.
clear about where I need to be putting my time and energy. And my team did a very, very good job. I mean, one of the things I had said to them when I came back was do not stack my calendar when I come back. I don't want anything in the first 2, 3 days that I'm back. I want to just meet with everybody individually. I want to get my head around what's been happening in the business. I want to be able to ask questions. Then let's go back. And I think that's also to the mistake that sometimes we make when we go away. Like our first day back after vacation is just jammed with fires and stuff.
Yeah. I was
Get
going to
right.
say,
You have no easy reentry, right?
I think that's a very good point that you just said there, especially for the ADHD entrepreneur. Because one thing I realized on my month off was
Mm,
we always seem to be in a rush to get back from wherever we were, but
right.
then we actually don't have a break before we get back to work. So that rushness follows into it. And then, yeah, I got to catch up on everything. So we just kind of create our own stress and overwhelm right away
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
ending the holiday to going into. So I think that's very key is communicate to the teams that don't overload my week. I just need to regroup, see where everything's at, and then I can slowly get back into it. And I think that's a
Hmm.
very key point for everyone to understand.
Hmm.
So I guess there wasn't a lot of big surprises when you came back from your sabbatical.
No, okay, here's why. So I'm very clear on my team's strengths and weaknesses. And one of my team strengths is that they are incredibly collaborative as a group. They really support each other. They have each other's backs. I don't have any gossipy, infighting, politicking within
Mm-hmm.
this group. They are really centered and highly collaborative. What we talk about in the work that we do with leaders is hey, for every strength, you've got a corresponding liability. So
Yeah,
you're really collaborative. You probably overuse that from time to time and you don't make decisions as quickly as you should, right?
exactly.
And so it's the same with the company culture. So I have a company culture that is this very collaborative, supportive group, but when it comes to driving decisions and pushing things forward and being really, that really high sense of urgency, um, I'm often the instigator of that because that's one of my strengths, right? Like that's one of my strengths is that fast moving, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that going away, that was kind of who I was leaving the business to. So I knew they'd be supportive of each other. If people need to step in, I knew that was going to be taken care of. When I came back, so again, the other thing to know about my team, because they're so collaborative, nobody really leans into leadership. They're all very happy, even my senior people, they're all very happy doing the work. They don't really love managing the work. They're sort of the view is, well, you're all adults. You know what you need to do, go off and do it. It's a great way to run, like as a management technique, works really well with senior people. But when it comes to running a business, you sort of need, that energy of looking at the bigger picture of the business, not just what every individual's doing. So of course, when I came back,
was that pushing a team towards a vision? Is
I
that
think
kind of
so.
what you're
and rallying the group together on the bigger cause together, and then just also, like with a business, there's multiple layers to any business, right?
Yeah.
And we often focus on just the business results, but there's also what is the collaboration that's happening in the team? What is the culture that we're creating here? How are people feeling? Blah blah blah. And so, when I came back, the person who was my designate was also just coming back off of 2 weeks of being on her own vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other senior person was on vacation for 2 weeks. So there was sort of this, lack of sort of what I would say, if it was me, and I'm going to just talk about me because my energy is very much for managing and leading. If it was me who had been the designate me in this scenario, I would have looked to see when my colleague was taking vacation, and I probably would have adjusted mine to make sure that I was back ahead of when I got back. If everybody's following my chain of logic here, right?
Because I think a lot of employees don't understand that.
Right.
Staff, it's like someone who's a little more advanced. Like the entrepreneur definitely sees that, especially if it's our own company.
Yes.
We want to keep
and I think it's sort of like a managing up expectation, right? Like I think about, if you want to manage your boss, how does your boss operate? How does your boss work? They all know I'm a quick start. They all know I'm going to come in, I'm going to be asking a million questions. I'm going to be wondering what was going on. And I need to know why. Why is this the way it is? And so, and you're coming off of a monthly report where how did we do this month? And we had a horrendous month in July. Right. And so financially. And so I am back on the Tuesday and I'm going, so what happened? Like, why, and what was even more interesting to me was nobody had set up individual meetings with me on my team. I had to they were trying to jam them in because they realized I was back. And then they realized my schedule was always already jammed with client things.
Right.
And so that's the collaboration, right? That's them waiting for me to set the tone and say, hey, I'd like you to do this. I'd like you to do that. Be ready with this, be ready with that. So, and I got a great set of updates from the project managers on all the client projects that I'd left them a list of and all updates, but they hadn't included everybody else on the team. They hadn't thought to go out and cast the net wider and say, let's give Glain one complete big picture. So again, that's, everybody being comfortable in their own little thing, but not necessarily stepping back and saying, what might Glain want when she comes back, right? And so in August, what I said to my EA was, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want to have everybody's view when we come back. Okay. Everybody's view of what's happening and what's going on. So I have the big picture of the business. And even then, when I came back in September, I got a nice list of everybody's what was on their to-do list and what they'd done and where the clients were at. Very helpful. But my right-hand person, when we had our meeting, there was no big picture, right? There was no generally, I know revenue's been down for the last 2 months, but here's what we're doing about it. And here's what's in the funnel. And here's what's happening on this level. And our new hire that had just started when you left, they're doing great. And this is what I'm seeing. And this is who I think you need to pay attention to and blah, blah, blah. And I think that didn't surprise me, but that also was the piece that gave that individual the clarity. I don't want to do this job, right? Your job. I'm so like the response she said to me was, I'm so glad you're back. Right? Like, I'm glad you're here. And so I think to do it for anybody who's thinking about doing a sabbatical, what I would say is really know your team, the strengths and weaknesses, and then really think about what are the assumptions you're making about what they might need to do for you when you come back, and get crystal clear with them on your expectations.
Yeah, and what I heard was is you have a great team that makes things recur. They can keep the business going where it is, where it's at. You're the visionary. You're the one that
Yeah.
kind of makes it up. And then you're number two. I think you got lucky that she was able to see that it takes more to run the company, or at least to do what Glain does, is be the visionary to move things forward.
Yes. And I think the sales piece, like I think you and I were chatting pre-call with, is that my theme for, I always have a theme for the business for the 12 months. And my theme for my next fiscal, which we're just entering into now on October 1st, is sales, because that was the pressure test. I just realized without me being there, nobody was focusing on revenue in the way it needed to be focused on.
Right.
And so that was really, that's my next big gap that I got to close.
Yeah. And then for me was the engineering manager is not very good at managing.
Right. Right.
And now he sees it.
Yeah.
And it opened up a lot of gaps and holes. So for me, I didn't really do a pressure test. I knew they were going to burn the place down, but at least I can see where the gaps were. I saw holes. And then the one was, he's a very project oriented person, very
Yeah.
great with clients, but overseeing people on the business side, he has no business acumen whatsoever. And I think you
Right.
just gave me clarity on, I am needed for the vision.
Yeah.
And they're not visionary like an entrepreneur is, but if I leave today, whatever we're doing right now, they're going to keep going for decades.
Yeah.
And slow incremental growth. But I think us being the entrepreneurs, we provide the vision and a direction, and we just got to stay the hell out of our team's way.
Yeah, and I think it's being real with ourselves too around, like, I think it,
the
I
ones that
think
are successful are real with themselves. I agree.
yeah, and I think it's not always easy to do as an entrepreneur, because your vision for your business is always evolving, and people can't read your mind around that
And they
stuff,
can't keep
right?
up a lot of times.
And they can't keep up. Exactly.
And plus the other thing too is I coined this term a long time ago, and actually we used to get together with local business people every Friday night at a pub, and we call it our weekly decompression. But entrepreneurs, we put our heart and soul into what we create.
For sure.
Employees and corporate people just put time.
Yeah.
And part of our heart and soul's in it. It's our baby, so we got more feel to it, and it's very hard for us to. It's, I don't know. For me, it was a big pill to swallow. To say I'll never have a team member that'll do the same thing as I'm doing or care as much,
right,
and see a big picture.
Yeah, and I think having run businesses for two other entrepreneurs, I mean, that is always the tricky thing. Like, I think you need to find somebody whose values align with your own as a business owner, and who does share the big picture vision of what you're trying to create, right? Like, on what you stand for and what your philosophy is. But where you have to be able to get out of the way is on the how they do it and what they ultimately do. Yeah. Because I think if you can really find somebody who really truly connects to your why in the same way you connect to the why, and you can get your ego out of the way to let them do the how and the what the way they see fit, then it can work, right? But I think a lot of entrepreneurs, the ego is, it's like that saying, your ego is not your amigo, and it just can get in your way.
Yeah. And I think what you're describing is you're a results oriented place, and you're actually living the results oriented mantra. I know a lot of people say, oh yeah, we're results oriented, but if your fingers in everything, that's not results oriented, because you got to rely on your team to do it. Understand where you're not good at doing it and stay out. Like, I'm not good at project management. Like, I'm good at it, but I hate it. I keep changing the path, and my fall throughs just keep going. Like, what the hell are you going to do today? And they're always afraid. So I stay out of that.
Yeah.
Final question. Would you take another 2-month sabbatical or a longer one?
I would definitely do it again. I think if I were to do it again, I would aim for a 3-month one, really to push the envelope one more level. I won't do it again, though, for another couple of years, for sure. I really want to get this sales piece nailed. And because like most founders, I'm still the primary salesperson. And so I need to get myself out of that. if I can do that over the next 2 to 3 years, then yeah, I'll definitely do a 3 month sabbatical next time. And I'm even thinking about, instituting it for longer term employees, like when you've been with me for a certain period of time, being able to
Yeah.
do a 2 or 3 month sabbatical as a thing for them. I really got a lot out of just disconnecting and being away from work. And I've been working summers since I was 13 years old. It
Yeah.
was time, right?
So are you going to reduce the amount of time you take off in a year or
No,
no?
I'm gonna continue. Like I usually do like 6 to 8 weeks a year,
Yeah.
and I'll continue with that. So
And that's
I'll
very
probably do
important.
3 weeks in the. I usually do 3 weeks in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I continue with that. I'm a big believer in time off. I think to me, there's measures for your success as an entrepreneur. And when I hear entrepreneurs tell me that they haven't taken a vacation in 10 years or whatever, I just think then you're not running your business well. Like to me, if you have a team, I'm going to caveat that. Like if you have a team of people that work for you and you're telling me you can't take time off, you can't take a week's vacation, there's something wrong with your leadership and you should like hire a coach and get that fixed because you're
Well,
never going to be able
again,
to.
that's the ego that comes in. And I had a mentor a long time ago told me, he says, my goal is actually I can just disappear for a week and they can still run it
Yeah,
unannounced. And I changed that. I want to be able to do that where I can just disappear for 2 months, just not show up for 2 months, and they know what to do.
yeah, but
And there's only
so
one way
that's
you
on
can do
you.
that is not be the person to do everything.
Totally. And the other thing too is workaholism is the one addiction that gets, a pass in our society. So
Yeah,
you also have to face like if
it's
you're
an
working all
addiction.
the time, yeah, it's totally
It's
an
an
addiction.
addiction.
It's an addiction and take a hard look at what you're avoiding in your life. Like you don't like your family, you're not having the conversations with your spouse that you feel like you should be
Mm-hmm.
having. That's what that does. So when I hear these successful entrepreneurs that get up on stage and they talk about how they screwed their first marriage up and they did this and they did that because those are choices that they made, right? And I don't give those guys a big hero's welcome because they realized it in their after they made a gazillion dollars or
And
on their
trying to
second or
coach
third
people to be
marriage.
better.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, right? So I think, you have to, if you're hiding behind work, go and get some
Yeah.
therapy. Like there's nothing wrong with it. Go and take a hard look at yourself and figure out why are you doing that? Because I think this notion of hustle culture and you got to sacrifice everything. Sometimes the less I work, the better our business does. And the more I focus
Yeah.
on money, the worse we do.
Yeah. And I
So,
find the less I do and the less I'm around the office, things get done quicker and better. So
totally.
so what I want, the three key things I got out of this was the sabbatical was a pressure test for the business and the team, where you actually learn to find the gaps and holes from the team and the service that you're providing. It actually gives an idea to potential future partners to see if that's an experience they want to gather or see if that's what they really want to do in a safe environment. And then your team gets to learn what they want while you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And keep the values aligned. But let's, for the listener, you have to give yourself permission to take time off. Let's just start with a weekend. For a lot of us, it's just a weekend. Make it a long weekend. Make it a 4-day weekend. Give it a week. Give it 2 weeks. Like for me, when the big first 2 weeks holiday was actually not that far. Like probably 8 years ago was the first one I ever took. Was 2 full weeks away. But you got to give yourself permission because, like Glain mentioned, it was about self-discovery, realigning what was important to you, and then to rediscover yourself, your purpose, and don't feel guilty doing it. And that's what I found. It's my purpose. What do I really want to do? I really share a lot of things I did in engineering here, and you have to take care of yourself. You don't take care of yourself, you're going to burn out and cause some problems. So, question to the listener right now is: what do you fear happening with your company if you don't take your well-deserved break? What's going to happen? If you think that, how can you prevent it? Glain, thanks for sharing this experience. I think there's a lot of stuff that you discovered, your team discovered, and I really want people to hear about this, that it can be done, and not do it because it's a trendy thing, because if you have a real purpose to do it, it makes more sense. So thanks again for sharing.
You're welcome.
And we'll talk to you soon. And thanks again to the listeners.
Thanks,
Take care.
Andre.